The news that could change the entire trajectory of the Miami Heat for the next few seasons has just been broken by Shams. My name is Manuel Buroz, and we're going to talk about all of that on this edition of Heat Digest. But before we do that, let's make sure we're continuing to subscribe as we continue to bring you guys the most up-to-date news with regards to the Miami Heat and all things in Heat culture. The biggest thing right now, one could argue, it has happened. Maybe. The Miami Heat, according to Shams, are looking to now take calls for Jimmy Butler and kind of shopping him around a little bit. Now, before I continue this video, I do want to preference it by saying he has not requested a trade. As I'm recording this video, he has not requested an official trade from the Miami Heat, but he has given the Heat three main teams as kind of targets that he would like to be traded to if the Heat do decide to go that route. Those teams being the Golden State Warriors, the Dallas Mavericks, and the Houston Rockets. And he has also informed the team that he is most likely going to opt out of his final year of his deal when that time does come. That's kind of the least shocking part of the entire news. Obviously, the main thing is that right now the Miami Heat are actively shopping Jimmy Butler. Now, again, per the reports, they're not aggressively shopping him, meaning they're not trying to move him by the trade deadline per se, but that is something that the Heat are open to doing for the right price. Now, I mentioned those three teams that he really has set as his top landing spots, he being Jimmy Butler. Golden State Warriors, me personally, don't really know how that's going to work. The Dallas Mavericks, again, I don't know if there's the assets that the Mavericks have that the Heat would really be willing to take pretty much, because I don't think the Mavericks are going to move from Kyrie. They're not going to move off Luka, obviously, Derek Lively, PJ Washington. I just don't see where that trade really can be created, which leaves me personally, I think the Houston Rockets are the team to keep an eye on with regards to Jimmy Butler. Now, I do want to say both Dallas and Houston, it's more so of a Texas thing. Jimmy Butler being from Texas, he wants to go back home. So that's really where those two teams kind of fall in. But overall, again, his reports, he wants to be traded to a contender, a win-now situation. Now, Houston's not necessarily a win-now situation, but I still think that it's the best for both sides. Jimmy Butler gets to go back home, gets to go to his roots, his Texas roots, and Miami can get a nice set of young talent and some veterans for the what has been the face of the franchise for the past few seasons now. A player that has really given us some great moments, and I do think that the Heat will do right by him if they do make a trade about sending him to a winning situation, even if it's not one of those three teams. But we're going to focus on the Houston Rockets right now. And the biggest thing right now for me right now, the biggest thing, like I mentioned, this is best for both parties involved, both parties being the Heat and Butler. The trade that I came up with in the trade machine, and I did kind of shop around online seeing if there's any offers out there. I already had this in mind. Dillon Brooks, Steven Adams, and Jabari Smith Jr. for Jimmy Butler straight up. This works with the contracts. Now, you see at the bottom there, it's according to the analysis, the Miami Heat would lose 14 more games while the Houston Rockets would win 13 more games. This was the trade that I kind of liked. This is the second trade I did. The next trade I'm going to show you guys is the one that I came up with off rip. And that trade being similar, same four players involved. The only difference now is I'm going to be adding Cam Whitmore from the Rockets in the trade. Now, I know you might be thinking, who's Cam Whitmore? Do we really need Cam Whitmore? I personally really like Cam Whitmore. He's a young guard. I really think he could be the X factor in this trade. Now, we break it down. If you're Miami, you get Steven Adams, who has been really kind of lost in the shuffle out in Houston. Obviously, it's the Alperen Sengun show. He's the future for that franchise. Arguably, I believe, the best player for the Rockets right now. So you're not really getting him a lot of minutes. We're going to break down each player's stats as the video continues. As a matter of fact, we can do that right now. Let's talk about specifically Mr. Steven Adams, who right now, he's played in only 13 games this season. He hasn't started in any. He's averaging 11 minutes per game. Again, obviously not an offensive source, only averaging 2.6 points. That's not really his game, but only 3 rebounds. That is his game. So you can kind of see that his role has been diminished in Houston, and Miami needs a center right now. Obviously, we've talked about the Khalil Ware thing to no end right now. Again, he just has not really cracked the trust of the coaching staff. And rightfully so. He is a rookie. He is trying to just find his way in the league. I think in the future, he will be that starting center caliber player. But right now, he's just not that. And if you can put Steven Adams next to Bam Adebayo, that's an underrated front court. I really do believe that. I really think that you can really kind of get creative when we talk about having Bam now be firmly in that 4 spot, not having to roam the paint, not having to be kind of a rim protector from the 3-point line. And Steven Adams, again, he's not an offensive guy. He's going to simply sit set some great screens, grab as many rebounds as he can, and just be a defensive not stopper, but a defensive force, I would say, a presence in the paint, which is what the Miami Heat have been really looking for in the past few seasons. Really feels like the entire Bam era with Miami. So I think Steven Adams would be a really good pickup for the Miami Heat on that front. Now, I mentioned Cam Whitmore. These are his stats. I don't want you guys to focus on solely this year, because right now he's only played 8 games. He's averaging 9 minutes per game, 5 points. He hasn't really been doing much. He's shooting 37% from the field. He's shooting 62 from the free throw line, and according to this, 4.8% from the three-point line. But Cam Whitmore is suffering from what their rookie this year, Reed Sheppard, is suffering from. There's just too many guards right now in Houston. You have Fred VanVleet, who you pay, so you got to play him. You have Jalen Green, who you're trying to figure out, so he's going to get reps. You have Tari East. You have so many guards right now that I don't think they have enough minutes to go around, frankly. Now, if you look at Cam Whitmore's last season, where he really, I feel like, kind of went under the radar, but a very good young player, 47 games. He did start for 2 of them, but 47 games played, averaging 18 minutes per game, 12 points, pretty much off the bench. He was shooting that 45% clip, 35%, almost 36% from the three-point line. Could get that free throw percentage up, but you see the numbers right there. He's already used to coming off the bench. He's already somebody who you can kind of just plug in. He's got good size. He's a very good athlete. I think he could be a nice backup to Tyler, maybe even be a starting backcourt mate with Tyler. Cam Whitmore can play that one kind of combo guard situation just like Tyler. So I do believe that could be an underrated backcourt when we talk about the longevity, because he is young. I believe he's younger than Tyler even, so you kind of have that same timeline. He's going to be on the timeline of a Jaime Jaquez, a Khalil Ware, even Bam Adebayo to a degree. So I think Cam Whitmore could be a very good piece for the Miami Heat if they're able to pick him up in the trade. Now, the other side of it was, of course, Mr. Dillon Brooks. Now, Dillon Brooks this year, he's having a very good season. Obviously, he's known for his defense, but offensively, he's not having a bad year. He's shooting 38% from the three-point line, 42% from the field, averaging 12 points a game, 31 minutes of play. That's really efficient. You'll take that from Dillon Brooks. Again, we know the antics, but he seems to have put that in his past. The contract isn't even that bad. If you go back here to the trades, Dillon Brooks getting paid $22 million a season. I honestly don't mind it. I know a lot of people, when he got the contract from Houston, were a little shocked. But in my opinion, I think it's a pretty decent contract for what he gives you. And yes, he might not, or he will not necessarily jump out in the box score, but sometimes you need players who aren't going to do that. He is one of those glue guys, again, a defensive stopper. You lose a defensive player like Jimmy Butler. You gain arguably one better right now just because of the age gap. Obviously, Dillon Brooks being significantly younger, again, similar to the timeline of Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo. I think Dillon Brooks would be a nice pickup to replace the defense, have a decent offensive game now, and I think just seamless transition to the Heat culture life here in Miami. And then the final player, who I think a lot of people are going to really focus on, is Jabari Smith Jr. Why? Jabari Smith Jr. has kind of gone under the radar since he was drafted. Obviously, drafted, I believe, number 3 in his draft class. A lot of high expectations for him. He had good size. He passed the eye test. He could shoot the ball very well. He had a lot of combines, a lot of comparisons, I should say, to a Chris Bosh type, and I could still see it happening. He's kind of fallen in a similar situation to a Cam Whitmore, to a Reed Sheppard. You just don't have enough minutes to go around, so you're not really sure what you have with him. Alperen Sengun, again, he has been the focal point. Tari Eason has come alive. You still have some other vets that you're kind of giving reps to right now, because the Houston Rockets are in that in-between right now. They're in the playoffs, but they're also kind of young, so can they really afford to make a playoff push right now? I don't really know. So I think Jabari Smith Jr. could benefit from a just complete changing in his environment. Now, we go look at this current season, playing 24 games. He started all of them, averaging 30 minutes per game, only 12 points, just about 7 rebounds. He's shooting the ball kind of okay, 43% from the field, 35% from 3. Again, those are good numbers. I just don't think you necessarily want that from your 3rd overall pick. But if we look at last season's numbers, 76 games played, 32 minutes per game pretty much, 13 points per game, 8 rebounds. He was shooting the ball 45%, 36% from 3. Similar numbers with more minutes and more opportunity. I think if he comes to Miami, you can slot him into the 4. Yes, that means Bam can possibly still play the 5. However, there is also a world where we can play a Jabari Smith Jr. at the 3, and you can go really big with a Bam and Steven Adams. And then if you have a backcourt of Cam Whitmore, of Tyler Hero, if Terry Rozier is still here, or Duncan Robinson even, you're not really concerned too much. Now you're just telling them, instead of being, better on defense, just don't be someone who's getting blown by. Don't be somebody who's getting cooked out there on the perimeter, because you have a great back line of arguably maybe the best front court if that ever happens, because you have some size, you have athleticism, you have rim protection, you have rebounding presence. That could be a really, really scary backcourt, a scary front court, I should say, for the Miami Heat if you have a Jabari Smith, if you have Bam Adebayo, if you have a Steven Adams. Overall, I think that trade really, really can help both sides. Again, if you're the Houston Rockets, you get a established vet, established playoff performer to help you make that playoff push, because you still have a Fred VanVleet, you still have a young core. You give reps now to Reed Shepherd, who I believe could be really good for them as in a backup role right now. Tari Eason is still there, Jeff Green is still there. Overall, the Houston Rockets, to me, are the team to watch for in the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes, if that sweepstakes kind of intensifies throughout the season. But that brings up to my final point here. How does it look for us if Jimmy Butler is traded to Houston and we get that, or similar on another Hawks? I do think there's a draft pick that can be kind of plucked from Houston in this trade, because in hindsight, or in retrospect, you are giving up the better player in the draft, in the trade, excuse me. So I think at least one draft pick, maybe 2027, I believe was what I was hearing from my research. What it looks for us is, if you trade Jimmy to Houston and you get this haul, specifically these players. So again, I'll show you guys the trade. It's Dillon Brooks, Steven Adams, Jabari Smith, and Cam Whitmore. You look at the contract situations. Steven Adams, the only one who'd be on an expiring deal. I think you could re-sign him on a pretty team-friendly deal. Dillon Brooks, you have for 3 years. Jabari, you have for 2 years. Cam, you have for 3 years. Basically, what I see there is you have a situation where you can kind of look at Jabari Smith Jr. as a one-year rental, kind of, where if it's going well, I think you keep him and you can sign him for the long term, somewhat, maybe not lock in for like a supermax or anything like that, but a similar situation where you can see if he fits the timeline and the team moving forward. For Cam and Dillon Brooks, I think they are going to be impactful players right away. I think of those 4 players, the ones that I'm really excited for are Cam and are Dillon Brooks, because you have a situation where, again, they can fit the play style, kind of trying to run up and down, defensive-minded players who can still be offensive sources to your team. Steven Adams, I think, is good if you can get that contract extension, which I think will happen, because now he's better in a role where he's better in a role where the team's trying to win, and that's really where he hasn't been. You know, when he was in Memphis, when he was in New Orleans, when he was in even OKC, he was really, really good because the team needed what he had or what he was providing. And Houston just is in that situation right now. So I'm pretty sure they're going to let him walk, to be honest with you. Maybe trade him in the trade deadline, because you can get something for Steven Adams. I firmly believe that. And leave Jabari Smith, where it's a kind of a low risk, in my opinion, high reward situation, where if he does blossom, maybe not one of your best players, but an all-star caliber player at the number 3 overall pick, just lucked into trading or flipping one of the aging stars in our league, still can really, really, really fill it up for you, can still be an impactful player. Maybe not the best player on the championship team, but definitely 1A, 1B, Robin to who's ever Batman in that situation, or a really good team around him like we've seen. He can lead to the championship. So I think you make out like as good as you can, honestly. I firmly believe if you can make this trade, you retool while still being young. That's the biggest thing right now for Miami. You need to go young. You need to match up the timeline with Tyler, with Bam, with a Jaime if you're throwing him in the core now, with a Khalil Ware if he eventually finds his footing with the team. I firmly believe the Houston Rockets are the best team of the 3 that Jimmy named. Now, there's plenty of teams in the association, obviously, but I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and I'll leave you guys with this note. Not a lot of teams are selling right now because of the first apron, because of the second apron, because of all the restrictions now with the CBA. There are not many selling teams. I think the only other selling team, in my opinion, might be the Pelicans because of all the injury problems and the young players that they have. But other than that, there's not going to be a lot of teams where you can try and pluck a young player or try and pluck another all-star caliber-ish player. That's just not what the NBA is right now because of the CBA. So I think the Rockets are the best team. I think both sides will be very, very intrigued to make this trade happen for the right pieces. For me, I think those are the right pieces. I think both teams can kind of be okay with the outcome because it helps both teams. I just firmly believe it really, really does. But comment down below if you guys like the trade that I came up with. If you guys have another trade in mind for for the Rockets or any of the other 2 teams that Jimmy named, again, Dallas or Golden State. And with that, we will catch you guys on the next episode of Heat Digest.